maximum power output. Over the course of the Formula One season, each driver's limited in the number of power unit and gearbox components they can use. Exceeding these limitations will result in grid penalties. Your available power unit. Keeping up with the development race is vital for continued success in Formula One. The multifunction display, or MFD, is a vital tool to give drivers control over their cars and make important information visible during the race. It's possible to cycle through the screens on the MFD to access car settings such as brake bias or the tyres to be fitted at the next pit stop, as well as car condition, component temperatures and race strategy information. When speaking to me through the radio, the MFD is also the place where you'll be able to view and select your available cars. The safety car might be deployed if there's an incident or the conditions are too dangerous to drive in. Once the safety car's out on track, there's no overtaking permitted and you must keep your lap time above a minimum in order to safely form a queue behind it. You can judge your pace using the delta element of the on-screen display. Ensure you drive slowly enough to keep it positive. Once the queue's formed, the safety car will re-enter the pits. Remember, there's no overtaking until the green flag's at the safety car line. If the incident's less severe, the virtual safety car might be deployed. It's not necessary to form a queue under the VSC, but just stay above the delta time displayed on your dash and obey yellow flag rules until the virtual safety car period comes to an end. Consistency over a long distance is vital in Formula One, so being able to manage tyres and reduce tyre wear is a useful skill. The tyre management programme, available in free practice sessions, will help you to learn tyre management whilst earning resource points for development of your car. Be careful on the controls to reduce the amount of tyre slip and therefore wear. The better you can do this, the higher you'll score and the more resource points you'll receive. You'll need to balance tyre management with speed, as you must stay under the target lap time. When the on-screen dot moves towards the red zone, that means you're wearing your tyres more than expected at this part of the lap. If it stays in the green or purple zones, you're wearing them less, so try and stay in those areas for a successful test. The formation lap's an opportunity to practice your race start and put some energy through the tyres and brakes to get them up to the optimal temperature for the beginning of the race. When the light goes green, pull away from the grid and stay in position, making sure to keep your car in good condition as you drive a lap at a steady but consistent pace in order to prepare for the start of the Grand Prix. As you return back to the grid, having completed the formation lap, you must park your car within the correct grid slot. Once you're happy with your car's position, bring the car to a standstill in readiness for that all-important race start. Races aren't won from the start line, but they can be lost, so getting a good start can make an important difference to your Grand Prix. As the lights come on, engage the clutch by holding the gear up button. Then feed in the throttle to build the revs. When the lights go out, release the clutch and it's away we go. Be careful not to release the clutch too early or you may end up jumping the start. If your RPM's too low, when you drop the clutch, your car might go into anti-stall. Don't panic if this happens, just keep a cool head, clutch in, build the RPM again and then release the clutch, just like the start procedure, to get underway again. Managing your turn into the pit box is essential in helping you and your pit crew achieve the fastest pit stop time possible. Believe me, I've been there and I know how annoying it is when you get it wrong. Get the timing wrong and this can cause you to add considerable time to your stop, meaning a crucial time advantage could be given to your opponents out on track. The drag reduction system, or DRS, opens a flap on the rear wing to reduce drag and improve the straight line speed of the car. Drivers are able to use this system in specific DRS zones as long as the circuit's dry. There are no additional restrictions to DRS use in practice and qualifying. However, in a race, the system can only be used when the driver's 1 second or less behind another. Watch the bar at the bottom of your multifunction display as you approach the DRS zone to see your distance to the activation point and activate it by pressing the DRS button when the prompt appears. track acclimatization program available in free practice sessions allows you to learn the track whilst earning resource points for the development of your car. On-track markers show the key points through each corner, and the more of these you're able to consistently drive through at an appropriate speed, the higher your score. In the unforgiving world of Formula One, free practice sessions are a vital part of any Grand Prix weekend. During your F1 career, you'll be able to utilise these sessions to complete practice programmes, which will help you to learn the track and earn you points that can be invested in developing your car. You'll also be able to adjust your car setup over the course of these sessions to try and find those extra Tyre selection's a critical issue in Formula One, and the current tyre regulations give individual drivers more freedom than ever. Pirelli allow 13 sets of dry tyres and 7 sets of wets for a full race weekend, so you need to be careful to make your allocation last the distance. From the dry sets, 3 are pre-selected by Pirelli and marked as mandatory for Q3 in the race, but drivers can adjust their allocation for the other 10 sets from the 3 available compounds. Just remember, during the Grand Prix, every driver must use one of Pirelli's mandatory sets plus 1 set of tyres from a different compound. In today's era of hybrid engine technology, Formula One employs a strict maximum limit on the fuel load. In order to run as light as possible, teams will tend to underfuel their cars, but this means drivers need to save fuel during the race. Fuel saving can be achieved by using a technique called lift and coast. This technique involves lifting off the throttle a few metres before the normal braking zone and allowing the aerodynamic drag to begin the process of slowing the car. This reduces the amount of fuel used while keeping speed relatively high. The best place to employ lift and coast is at the end of a long straight into a heavy braking zone. The race strategy program's all about developing a personalised approach for the race ahead. This test will help the team to understand how much fuel is required and also the best tyre policy to employ for the race. The results are determined from data which is directly affected by your driving style, so managing your fuel and tyre wear during the test, for example, will result in a strategy that caters to these qualities. The qualifying pace programme, available in free practice sessions, challenges you to beat a target time that corresponds to an expected position on the starting grid. Complete a flat-out lap on the fastest tyre compound to set the best time you can, and you'll earn resource points for hitting your target. The race strategy programme's all about... Sprints are a shorter race session at around 1/3 distance of a standard feature race. Drivers are not required to pit during a sprint for a change of tyres, though they are able to do so. Sprints now have their own dedicated qualifying session, and there are points awarded for the top 8 finishers of the sprint in the following denominations. First place awards 8. In Formula One, incidents can occur that cause a risk to both the drivers and officials on the track. If these circumstances are such that the track can't be negotiated safely, even behind the safety car, then the session will be suspended. At this point, red flags are ordered to be shown. All cars must slow down and return to the pit lane and wait for the track to be cleared of any danger before the session can be restarted. During the session suspension, cars can be worked on within the allotted time, including regulated repairs of genuine accident damage and the changing of tyres. Once it's safe to resume the session, any lapped or out-of-position cars will be allowed to leave the pit lane to complete a further lap to establish the correct starting order, before all cars leave the pit lane behind the safety car to complete a further racing lap to reform the grid for the session restart. Once all cars are in position on the grid, the session can be restarted with a standing start procedure.
The long wait is over. This is it, a brand new season. And before the show gets well and truly underway, we've got the all-important matter of a free practice session. It's great to be back. So much unknown before we get underway. So what will be going through the drivers' minds as they get ready for the new season?
The faster you can work around the circuit conditions and get the car tailored to your liking, the better. And then you can just focus on the job in hand in terms of lap times. But first of all, you've got to get the car feeling right.
OK, mate, this is the first running of the real car. Now, I know it's a big ask, but let's get some useful data and get you used to how the practice sessions work. Let's start the season as we mean to go on, eh? I know we can have a great year, so let's go. OK, track's green right now, so take a few laps to get the tyres up to temp and get yourself in the zone. OK, our best lap so far, 1 minute 35.9. When you get a chance, make sure to run some of our practice programs. They don't all need to be done in one session, but there's valuable data there to help race strategy and car development.
Sadly, it's time to say goodbye as free practice is over. However, we'll be back shortly for more Formula One action. Turns 9 and 10 are very tricky. Ignore 9 almost entirely. Stay in the middle and take it straight so that you're set up for 10. If it gives you problems, remember that it's all about exit speed out of 10, so don't try and carry too much momentum into the apex as you'll just understeer off into the sand. OK, there are only a few cars out on track. We should consider getting out there. OK, so I just want to remind you to keep an eye on your tyre usage. We're going to have to give 2 sets back at the end of this session, so they'll be unavailable for the rest of the weekend. We're going to hand over the 2 most worn sets, so don't ruin the tyres that you might want to use later. car settings screen on your multifunction display will allow you to change various settings as you drive. Open the display with the MFD button and you can then navigate up and down to the setting you want to change. I know the team back at the factory have put in a lot of hours getting the car ready for you this weekend, so let's repay them with a really strong performance. We have a number of programs to run during these practice sessions. You can check the details in the car monitor. We'll get good data for both the race and the factory teams, so they're well worth running. Right, the car's ready. Let's get it out there. Okay, just want to remind you to keep an eye on your tyre temperatures, which you can do on the temperature panel of the MFD. We monitor carcass temperature and surface temperature, and you'll get the best performance when they're both inside a normal operating window. Surface temps tend to fluctuate faster, so try a few laps with the data open and get a feel for how to control them. Right, so our best lap so far, 1:38.7. To view information on your current levels of tyre wear and damage, press the MFD button to open the multifunction display, and then again to cycle to the tyres and the damage screen.